Hey everyone, I wanted to make a video on one of the most impactful courses I've ever taken in my life. It's called the Landmark Forum, and I'll drop a link to it. It's landmarkworldwide.com, and just wanted to share with you takeaways from the course. Um, just reflecting. So for context, I took this course like 5 years ago, so it's been quite some time. But I wanted to share with you my takeaways because it has been probably the most impactful 3 days of my life in terms of self discovery and all that good stuff. So let me share with you a little bit about the details, and then I'll share with you my breakthroughs and why I decided to take the Landmark Forum. So I took the Landmark Forum because my life was in a mess. I had a ton of credit card debt. I was getting let go from a lot of different positions. And, I was just trying to find myself, right? I wasn't really sure, what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. So I would recommend the Landmark Forum if you're struggling with self worth, or you just want like something to work on. You really are curious about your just to gain more self awareness, and you want to be able to. I mean, honestly, I think that course is good for anyone, no matter how much self development work you've done. But I do want to share with you, me personally, why I've taken it and a little bit more about the details as well. So, for context, they have it online now. I personally did it in person in the New York City Center. So, the New York office, or like the conference room where all this happens, there was roughly, I think, about 150 people that attended. And the online has around that much too. In the past, when I've seen maybe 120 to 130 people on average with the online version, so pretty similar. So they have us sit in a room for 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for pretty much all of those days. So from 9 a.m. to sometimes 10, or even 10:30 to 11, depending on how fast everyone gets their breakthroughs. And I personally have paid for a lot of my friends and family to do it. I think it's $695 now. And I remember sitting there and was like, man, this is a lot of money. I came to a guest event called the Special Evening, which is a free event where people like myself will bring, and other people that have completed the Landmark Forum will come back and will bring a friend or a guest, and it's led by a forum leader who's a highly trained person. They're, I would say, probably the epitome of training and development when it comes to personal development. So all really brilliant people, and it's a pretty diverse group of people. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's like 60 forum leaders at this point. So just wanted to preface that these are just my opinions. This is my perspective of what I've gotten out of the Landmark Forum. And I'll link you to the page as well if you want to read more about it. But just to give you a little bit more of the logistical things. And I forgot to mention, there's a final evening session from 7 to 10:15. Um, these are all approximate because it really depends on the breakthroughs and how far along the programs are, or people are in the program, right? Some people, they get the breakthroughs a lot more. So, um, okay. So the Landmark Forum, they have in person now as well. Now that COVID is, things are slowly kind of getting back to normal. But I think the only in persons they have is Chicago, New York, LA, and San Francisco. So just some of the major centers. So there's breaks approximately every 2 to 3 hours with a 90-minute dinner break. And how it works. So there's a lot of science that goes behind it, but I'll just go over the core syllabus, and then I'll kind of share with you what my takeaways are for each of the section. So day one, there's orientation, so they'll just kind of set expectations, what you will expect. So the first thing you learn is the already always listening. So that is basically like the lens that we come from, right? So let's say we're Christian or we're Muslim or we're Jewish. I mean, as you guys know, it's kind of hard to give that up, right? It's kind of hard to think like if you're, let's say, your parents were you're Korean and your parents were raped by Japanese soldiers in the past, right? We're always gonna have or those people are always gonna have a listening that Japanese people are bad, and there's gonna be some sort of resentment, right? Obviously, there's exceptions to the rule, but there's a lot of examples. So for me, I saw that I'm Asian, so a filter that I always listen from is like, okay, I'm gonna be probably one of the very few Asian people on the sales team, and I always look at things like, oh, okay, most executives are probably going to be white in corporate America, and they're probably going to be middle-aged male, right? That's just what I'm listening from. So when we have that, then we have a lot more self-awareness and we can actually do something about it, right? So that's an extremely powerful distinction. The third thing you learn is the hidden power of context. So context is everything, right? Like even in me, like even talking about the landmark forum, right? I'm giving you guys some context, and the context is that I got a lot out of this, so I'm obviously biased, right? I'm not gonna talk crap about landmark because I have gotten so much out of it personally, right? So a context that when we can see context, we see that everything is ultimately a context. Where if I know that, okay, I have a context that life is short because I just had a lot of friends in my 30s that have died, or like a lot of people I know have cancer, then I'm going to be seeking like environments where that's the case. Like, oh, see, like this person died from cancer, this person died from cancer. That doesn't make it not true. It's just the context that we're living in. The vicious circle. So this is all still day one. The vicious circle is something that happened in our past that is robbing us of our joy and effectiveness. So in my case, you could see that the vicious circle is something that keeps coming up and keeps coming up. So for instance, a vicious circle of what happened is my dad left us when I was 15, and because of that, I don't open. It's hard for me to trust my dad, and he doesn't trust us because he thinks that we make him feel bad that he left. So there's some judgment, right? So you could see that it's a vicious circle because it's going to repeat itself, right? Unless we do something about it. Rackets and the payoff and the cost. So rackets is probably one of the most common themes that you'll learn in the landmark forum, and like a racket could be is we're getting something out of it, right? Even though it doesn't always serve us, we think it serves us. So a racket for me would be like, oh, I will people please, and it's a racket because a lot of people like me, I have a lot of friends, but the payoff is that I have a lot of friends, I'm very likable, I'll win popularity contests and things like that. But the cost is sometimes my well-being. Sometimes I will get less sleep. Sometimes if someone texts me and I don't get back to them, I feel bad, right? There's a guilt associated with it. So having that awareness can help us with our level of happiness and can rob us of our satisfaction and fulfillment. So that's day one. Day two, the first part, you'll learn something called the illusion of someday, right? So we think that someday, for me, it's like, okay, someday I'll travel the world, 100 different countries. You may argue like, oh, that's a pretty strong vision, right? But what if I reframe that to think possibility, and maybe instead of doing, Tim Ferriss also has this rule, right? If I It'll probably take me 50 years to do that in the next 50 years, right? Assuming that I'll grow to the age 85, which I think I will because I'm pretty healthy. But you never know, right? So what if I shifted that and I say, what if I did that in 30 years? So when I get to 65, okay, so what would that look like? Instead of doing two new countries, a a year, I could do 3 or 4 new countries a year, right? So it just helps us shift this possibility and be able to think, instead of thinking someday, actually put it into practicality. The next thing, section of day 2 is called the myth of I's, because, and is. So when we think of reality, we think things are separate from us, right? We think that us, I, is my identity, but we don't realize that a lot of these realities that we construct is not always necessarily true, right? Like if I relate to everyone as the same as me, there is no us and them. There's just human beings, right? Like if I relate to Caucasian people as different, that's not very empowering for me, right? It causes a separation versus that we're all human beings. Number 3 is distinguishing, opening new words. When we distinguish, right, we have more awareness around things. So, for instance, the distinction that they gave is like, okay, when you master balance, you're able to ride a bicycle, right? So there's language to these contexts. So, for instance, when I make a distinction between, I mean, even like any word, right? Like I could say, all right, technology sales. If I distinguish it, then there's language around it, which allows me to be able to like work on it. And this kind of goes back to context, right? But distinctions help us be able to go in more in depth and gives us power and for creativity and action. And I'll post the syllabus uh, on the YouTube channel as well, and all that good stuff, so that you could see all of this. So the next portion, number 4, is freedom from anxiety. So all of us have anxiety in some shape or form, right? You'd be lying if you said that you never stress about anything. That's impossible. Human beings, we inherently stress a lot. So uh, one of the most common obstacles is to being effective is fear, right? So imagine if you could live a life of freedom from anxiety, right? The landmark forum gives you some of that. I wouldn't say that it's, oh, you'll never get anxiety ever in life, but when we examine what we have anxiety from when we think about it, right, and this comes up a lot during all of the landmark courses, we're able to have awareness around what gives us anxiety. So, for instance, one of the fears that I thought about a lot during landmark programs is just the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, right? So, because I'm exploring that a lot more, and you'll have people that you get assigned with. If it's virtual, you go into breakout rooms. In person, you'll just get off into your corner and then share, or you'll just sit, you're sitting next to someone. So typically you'll turn to the right or the left, and they'll match you up into pairs typically. um, and you'll go through these exercises. So there'll be a framework, there'll be questions that they'll ask you, and it this is a deeper one, and you'll see how we have freedom from anxiety as I continue to go through the frameworks. But the first thing you do is you go through how our identities get constructed, right? All of us, from childhood, there's instances that has made us who we are today. So, for instance, and this is really, really important, right? Because if you can come to the defining moments in your life that has made you who you are, like for instance, I'm a recovering people pleaser, right? And the reason why is I can pinpoint it back to, okay, I moved around a lot. I've lived in close to 30 different places at this point in my life, and I'm only 35. So I had to be a chameleon, right? To be able to adapt, to be able to survive, right? Where I'm like moving from California to Connecticut to North Jersey to South Jersey to Central Jersey, New York City, and then so that is my part of my winning formula, like to be able to adapt. But it's also led me to, I can now choose if I get to be that like likable person, or I can choose to put myself first, right? So it's really important to go through that. So the third one now is called. This is day three, so would be Sunday. The pervasive influence of the past. So what's pervasive is something that keeps coming up, right? Back back again. I'm gonna look up the word pervasive because I always find it interesting when I look up words that I don't use as frequently. So it says spreading widely through an area or a group of people. So spreading. So what's pervasive of the influence of the past is, and we have technologies that we go to in the landmark forum. So you can put the past where it belongs in the past. Many of us bring the past with us. We carry it on our shoulders, and you can visibly see how some people are so impacted by the past. I don't know any human being in the world that has not been influenced by the past in some shape or form, right? Some people are much better at it, obviously, because they've done the work or they've reflected, they've journaled, they've gone through programs like the Landmark Forum. So, an example for me of something that affects me that is in the past is okay, Davidson, in the past, like I've had a lot of thoughts about how Asian males are undesirable, right? And Asian women, statistically speaking, have the highest percentage of being in relationships, and black women and um, Asian men have the lowest. Like if you look at dating websites, they post this stats everywhere, right? I can let that really impact who I get to be, and that I'm not going to be liked, or like people won't like look at me as desirable, or I can choose a different future, right? But at least having that awareness allows me to do something about it versus it being unconscious or subconscious and I'm not even aware that this is affecting me. Number two, change versus transformation. So change is not permanent. I relate to change as like something that just happens, right? But transformation, on the other hand, and once again, language gives us power, is expansive and infinite. So it happens permanently. So in that language transformation, and because this is a proven formula and millions of people have gone through this program, like I can honestly say that I've transformed from this program. By day three at night, I remember waking up Monday morning and I was like looking, and I was in New York City at the time, and I was looking around like, wow, this is the first time I've been able to appreciate the skyscrapers and been present, and there was a peace in my mind, and it was beautiful, right? There was a peacefulness in my being. Number three, language as an access to power. So, language is commonly thought as a bridge to the world, and we learn language in order to connect with people, to communicate in the world. But we don't think about the language that we think about, that we speak to ourselves, right? We think about language with others. So, we realize that language is an instrument of creation, right? So if my language to myself, and a lot of this is unconscious, right? It's like, Davison, you're not worthy of your dad being around for you. You're not good enough, so you need to prove to others that you're good enough. I'm going to have a chip on my shoulder, right? Or my language could be like, Davidson, you're super loved. Everyone loves you. You're an amazing human being. You're a contribution, and life is awesome, and it's really a gift, right? What language is more empowering? So once we have that awareness, I can tell myself in the morning, Davidson, you're going to accomplish a lot of amazing things, because in the past I have accomplished a lot of amazing things, right? But I wouldn't I'm not going to lie, my language before doing advanced course was like, Davidson, why'd you get fired from so many different jobs? You know, there's a difference. There's a power to me speaking and listening to myself powerfully. And lastly, the nature of choice. This is probably the most powerful distinction if we can master it. And it's saying basically, I mean, obviously, I would recommend doing the course, right? In those 3 days, it will be totally worth it. But I'll give you a snapshot of what I got from that distinction. So most of us make a decision. Most of us do things, and we don't really think we have a choice, right? We're like, oh, I have to go to work so I can pay the bills, or oh, I have to treat my wife well, right? Of course, like you want to treat your wife well. Of course, like you probably should go work, right? But I mean, there are people who don't work, right? There are people who live on the ocean, you know, sleep in Hawaii, you know, there's homeless people, right? And they made a choice. But many of them probably don't think they had a choice. Many of them got that way because they let life happen to them instead of them really choosing, right? There's always going to be examples of people who have made it past that homelessness, right? For me, I made a choice. All of my decisions was a choice, but many of us operate like we didn't make that choice. Someone made that for us, right? Especially as adults, right? So, yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to post it in the chat, and I could make a video. Anything regarding Landmark Forum, I would love to answer your questions. Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this video.